let's talk about my nightmares. So it sounds kind of like fruity as fuck. My nightmares, guys. But I think I've never thought that there's much of like a psychological basis in them up until I started learning more about trauma and PTSD. And now I can really, really see it. And so I think this video might actually help someone who somewhat gets frequent nightmares really connect the pieces together. So 2 days ago was the first I've had in a while, and it really, really became apparent to me that my nightmares are pretty much always related to like family trauma, abuse. I wrote it down as well because oftentimes like you'll get like some kind of nightmare and then, you know, you kind of remember a general sense, but it's really like the story that makes it scary. And my ones, I think they're particularly scary because like I wake up crying from them. I'll be totally honest. Like every time I get I don't get normal nightmares, especially for years, because I haven't watched movies. That's actually really fucking interesting. I don't get nightmares about stuff about movie stuff. So I remember, you know, being a child, if I watched a scary movie, I'd get a nightmare about that movie. That hasn't happened in so long because I haven't watched a movie, I haven't watched TV shows, I haven't like taken that much like content in. And so the only thing that I get nightmares off is just my family, literally. And when I was younger, I would get nightmares that were always related to getting lost and trying to find my way back home, because that happened a fair amount of times. This is a side note, but like I didn't really have like very good friends, and I moved into this new house like in Warrington like 10 years ago, something like that, like 15 years ago. And I remember like, you know, I wasn't really familiar with the area. I've only moved here for like a couple of months or something, so I only knew like, you know, the local streets. And I remember that it happened a few times where my friends pretty much ditched me. And it was fucking traumatic. And like, I don't, you know, this was before like I was maybe in year 7, year 8, so no one had like phones or anything back then. Or maybe we did, but we had like, I couldn't call home, or maybe I didn't even want to tell my parents that I was lost or something. So I had to try and find my way back, which was very, very scary, like asking strangers and everything. And so I remember when I was a teenager and a young adult, the scary dreams that I would get would always be related to like being lost and trying to find my way back home, which is really interesting. But for the past few years, especially for the past few months, past 6 months, it's been so entirely focused on like the abuse that like my family put me through. And I actually got therapy for this. So I've been through 2 therapists and 2 types of therapy, and the second most recent one that I did was EMDR. And we really, really made it a point to focus on like the situations, the experiences that were leading to these nightmares, which was like always like bedtime related, late, and yeah. I didn't even expect to say this, but I was just reading a book on complex PTSD this morning, and it fucking hits me. Like every time I do some research on this, it hits me like how much this really can influence your life. Like it's so much more than you really believe it is. And on a side note, there was this like YouTuber businessman, Alex Hormozi or something, who he kind of has like an attitude similar to Andrew Tate, which is kind of like, oh, you know, like depression and trauma isn't real if you just pretend like it's not. And like, whilst I do understand their train of thought, I think a fair few people are watching this and they're going to think like, no, but depression's not real because Andrew Tate said so. And but if you just don't think about your PTSD, then you won't have it or anything. Like, you've got to understand, like, you can't take like advice from people who've never even studied psychology or psychiatry. Do you know what I mean? These are fucking businessmen who are literally just saying some bullshit. And like, it can help some people, because a lot of people who kind of say that they've went through shit, or, you know, a lot of people who say that they're depressed aren't really depressed. They just live in like fucking weirdos. They don't get sunlight. They don't eat good food. They overstimulate themselves. And so it's like, is it really depression or is it just bad habits? So there is a sense of truth to that. But I did watch this guy's video who was just saying like, oh yeah, just like ignore your trauma and stuff. And like, I don't think that's like a good idea. I think facing it and processing it is incredibly just painful, but I think that's where the growth really comes from. So I did this round of therapy and we somewhat resolved like a certain situation, which was all to do with like my brother sexually abusing me. And that felt like, I wouldn't say really resolved, but, you know, like felt like we made good progress, and we kind of like stopped it there for some time because I was going to go traveling. And then like since then it's felt a lot better But I realize now that it's felt a lot better because a lot of the influences are gonna be subconscious because we're not currently processing it. It's like, for example, if you're living day to day, and before this video, before I spoke about trauma or anything in this video, for the last couple of days, you probably weren't walking around thinking like, oh, you know, that my trauma's probably doing that to me. My childhood experiences are the reason why I've just behaved like this. But if you begin to go and read a book on complex PTSD, if you read The Body Keeps the Score, or if you read Complex PTSD From Surviving to Thriving by Pete Walker, if you read one of those books, any kind of books on PTSD, child abuse or something, you'll begin to realize like how much more this is actually impacting your life. So it's really interesting. Like you won't know up until you open that kind of worms. Just make sure you're ready for it, because once you open it, it's like it started, and you're beginning to process now. So 2 nights ago was the first nightmare that I had in probably, you know, I was gonna say like ages, but honestly, ages for me in terms of having nightmares is like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, since about January. And I remember when I was doing this round of therapy in like December, January, it was every 2 to 3 days. Waking up in like sweat, waking up in literal tears, shaking. Because I think from what I remember, like a nightmare that's fueled by content like a scary movie, it's just kind of like an unrealistic dream. And so it's like, you know, the clown's coming to kill you and everything, and then you wake up and you're like, oh, okay. I don't know if this is the same with other people who've got like PTSD or anything, but for me, my nightmares are always quite multi-leveled, kind of like Inception, and that makes them terrifying, honestly, because the ones that I can really remember, I'll try and walk you through it, right? So obviously when you're dreaming, you don't necessarily know you're dreaming unless you're like lucid dreaming and everything, but like we'll assume that you don't. So what you truly believe is like real life. Imagine it's kind of like, it's weird as fuck to even try and explain it. It's like my brother or my father is the darkness that's like, it's heavy, it's on top of me, it's pressing me down, it's suffocating me, it's choking me. It's kind of like they are the sleep paralysis demons. I get sleep paralysis quite often as well, and it's very interesting because when I get sleep paralysis, like they're also the people that I call out to for help. So imagine having sleep paralysis, your eyes are open, you can just about breathe, and you see a dark, like, see my wardrobe, right? This is my wardrobe there. I'm sleeping right here on this bed over here, and out the corner of my eye I see like a dark figure crouched on top of the wardrobe, and it flies and lands behind me, and I physically feel like the weight of it behind me. Consciously, like I'm almost like kind of like pissed off. I'm like, oh, another sleep paralysis. Like I know what's happening, but it's still fucking terrifying. But it's almost like I almost like force, like with shit, like you can't move. It's like, it's so fucking, if you've had sleep paralysis, you can't really move. You feel glued and you can't move. You're like, you're in the middle of like a dream, but like your eyes open, you're awake at the same time. But I can somewhat like force, with complete and utter force, and I'm ready to like fucking scream and everything. And if I tell you, I should just tell you about the one this happened like 2 years ago when I was in Manchester, and it's fucking terrifying, right? Yeah, like, oh man, like it's hard to explain, but if I can tell it in a way that you would be able to grasp how it happens to me, you'd be like, wait, what the fuck? So imagine that happens, right? So I see like, you know, dark figure, sleep paralysis, it's behind me. I feel it breathing down my neck. I feel like this fucking creature or something. I can't move or anything. I'm ready to like scream. I'm like, I'm trying to like say, like call out to my brother, call out to my father so he can come and help. Because I'm sure if they came into my room, they'd be able to like turn the light on, like pull me up and be like, you know, what's happening and everything. And nothing happens for a while. I'm struggling and everything. It's like really scary. And then eventually, like it kind of like goes away, and then something like, you know, everyone's heard me, so like my brother comes into the room and we kind of talk for a bit, and then things get like creepier when now he's almost assumed the position of the sleep paralysis like demon by him. Like at first he came in to save me, now he's fucking like he's pretending, like I told him what happened and now he's pretending to like do it. And I'm like stuck in sleep paralysis again. And then I wake up. And I wake up in a different city. So the one that I just described to you was when I was living in Manchester like 2.5, 3 years ago. I'm sleeping next to my girlfriend. and I go through like a multi-level dream, like a sleep paralysis. I wake up, sleep paralysis again, and then I wake up where real life is. And a similar thing happened just like 2 days ago. I wrote it down because I've somewhat forgot about it. But these are the exact words that I wrote. Shit, fucking hell, that one small sentence just fucking, that really hurts, man. I wrote this one small sentence and it really, it reminds me of something that I was processing in therapy as well. So I literally, like, it's there's a bunch of sentences, but one of the sentences is literally just 4 words, just saying, no one ever helps. And when we were doing this therapy, it's kind of like goofy. You create like characters that come and help you, and so you have to like kind of. It was like goofy as fuck. So I picked like Batman and Adonis and everything. And when you are processing like a traumatic memory, they get you to process and then say like, oh, like what if you brought the characters in to help you, and you kind of like visualize what it would be like if like Adonis like stopped my father from beating me. And I remember that's the point where it would just stop working for me, and I would just tell him like I don't know like how, like I can't like do that. And it became apparent that my brain couldn't really process like someone helping me at those times of like abuse, because no one ever did. No one ever like stepped in to help when my dad would like hit me in public, and like people would see it. And I still remember the faces of people who saw me get hit by my father, like multiple times get hit, and like it was almost like it kind of bothered their enjoyment because they were sat in like a cafe or something. Same thing with my brother as well. The time that like my brother has hurt me, the help that I would get from my family would make it worse, because then my dad would beat my brother, and then that would be more traumatic for me to see anyway. Like straight away I go from victim to like now feeling like shit, like I've got so much empathy and love for my brother, and like I'm literally seeing him get beat by a grown-up. Or me and my brother are fighting, but I'm the one getting beat up, and then both of us get like slapped by my dad, and like there is no help. So the exact words that I wrote here is multi-level dream, waking up and then back into the dream. Sleep paralysis, trying to get like my brother, I wrote his name but I won't say it, like I'm trying to get my brother's help. No one ever helps. Last night sleeping, brother is the darkness, can't move, sleep paralysis, no one came to help. It hurts and it crushes me. I'm fighting and suffocating. I break free trying to get help but no one comes. I find myself in bed again. Vigilance. Same thing happens. It's a dream within a dream. What's interesting, this was like one specifically about like my brother like holding me down, and what's interesting I wrote, it was that I'm often in bed for the ones which are related to my brother, and that's where like the physical abuse, like the fighting and him like punching me and choking me and stuff, that's been like all around the house and everywhere really. But the sexual abuse was obviously in bed. So I wrote down, like I was almost journaling, this must have been like 2 a.m. I was journaling saying, how much have I went through? I don't know. I think I've repressed a lot. Just yesterday I felt like I had made so much progress on complex PTSD that I didn't really need to think about it anymore. I didn't need to consider therapy or even finishing the book on it. Every time I have something like this, I'm reminded how ingrained it is, and something like this is like the very obvious symptom. But how many less obvious symptoms am I missing? How much of my life, my feelings, my values and actions are conditioned by it? No one ever helps me in my dreams. That really hurts. In therapy, EMDR, I literally couldn't even imagine a character helping me because no one helped. And then I knew that I would write this as a script, and so I must have wrote this at 2 a.m. for you, like the viewer. I know this seems sad, and I know you feel bad for me, but I feel bad for my brother. He's the real victim of all this. What I've said on my channel and what I've opened up with, like I think that's I think that's like a small amount compared to what my brother has experienced. One of the things I've said previously about parents who have been quite abusive, I've said this to a few people and it really clicked with them, and I said that, you know, if let's say you're an adult now and you realize your parents were abusive, and a lot of like brown people have done this, and if you bring it up to your parents, it's almost like they'll just brush it off. They'll be like, oh no, it wasn't that bad. Oh, I barely even touched, you know, they'll say something like this. And the truth is that like that pisses you off because you really want them to just kind of listen to you and kind of understand the pain that you've went through, and because they minimize it, that really hurts. The truth is they're not minimizing it. In their mind, that's truly what they believe is the truth, because they've repressed. Because what hurts more than being the one who gets like beaten by the parents is the parents who's endangered and hurt their child. Like, I think that must be so psychologically overwhelming, that parents who have hurt their children, like, it takes them years to even comprehend the damage that they've done. I remember for years I would bring it up to my dad, and like it would always just be brushed off, the same with my mum. Oh, we barely hit you and everything. And I wasn't special in this. Like, so many young people when I used to do coaching told me the exact same thing. It takes months or years to get someone, like a parent, to kind of realize how much damage they really did to you. And I think that's probably more traumatic than actually just getting hit yourself. I also wrote about a different kind of nightmare. So there's three really that I frequently have. And there's one which is like this multi-level weird one about like my brother, or sometimes it's my father in like a similar situation. There's the one which I'm like stranded, I can't get home, and I think that's like, maybe it was pretty, like I never really considered it like traumatizing when like I was out with my friends on like a bike ride or something, and they just kind of disappeared because they were like trying to speak to this girl or some bullshit, like but it probably was pretty traumatizing. And then I've just wrote this, couple about train. So I've had a couple of nightmares, like a fair amount over you know the years and stuff, but a fair percentage of my nightmares are based on being on trains and public transport. And I remember there was like this crazy one. This was like, I think it was definitely fueled by like weed withdrawals as well, because I remember there was times when I was like trying to take like detoxes and not smoke for a few days and everything. I remember that's when it would be worse. But I remember just before I moved back home and I was still living in Manchester next to my girlfriend, that there would be some nights where I would have such bad nightmares that I would be drenched in fucking sweat. I would like wake up like shivering and literally rocking backwards and forth. I remember there was one specific, like there was a couple about like public transport, and there was one specific one where like the train just goes out of control. And nothing has happened in terms of like train crashes or anything, but I knew, like I could just piece it together that was related to what's happened to me on a train, which I've gotten like fucking a huge level of anxiety, because maybe I should speak about that in like a completely separate video, not really like if you wanted to hear the story of like really what happened after the Manchester bombing, when like this two racist guys that fully just fucking came at me on the train. Like there's a story, and maybe like I instigated it because I know I'm gonna get a level of hate because it's like, oh, but you should have just walked away. But it's like they were being racist to a fucking kid, bro. Like they were literally being racist to like a mother and like her little daughter, saying that they caused the Manchester bombing. And so I like kind of like, I wasn't even trying to be the big man, or I'll be completely honest, I'm not trying to act like I'm courageous or anything. I didn't even like think. I just like kind of stood in between them, told them like to shut the fuck up and everything, and then they're coming at me. Guy gets his like champagne bottle, his like alcohol bottle, like ready to fucking hit me. His friends like running at me, like trying to scare me and everything. I should probably explain this in a separate video, but yeah, like what's interesting is that I haven't specifically thought about those guys, but it's always been about like being on trains and public transports, which I'm so certain is like, I don't have a fear of the train itself, it's more like the people on it, because I've never once had a nightmare of like a car crash before, for example. Yeah. That's so fucking sad, that one. I keep looking at him, man, that one sentence, just no one ever helps. Shit. I saw a quote once which was like, be the kind of person that your younger child needed, and I really hope that I have become that. And I didn't even mean to like really piece these bits together, but it's very interesting that in the last few minutes I've just told you that there was like racist people who were starting on like this little family, this mother and a child, and like I potentially was like the one to help. I didn't even mean to make that comparison. I'm not trying to be like big-headed. Oh yeah, like I've become the guy that my younger child is, because my younger self would probably still think that I'm a dickhead right now. But hopefully, I've been making some good progress with that. Yeah. So I'm really interested if because I think if you've went through like some shit, like some abuse as a child, I think it probably, like, it's my theory that it'll come out into the content of your nightmares. And so I'm interested in like if someone who's watching this has been through, like, if you've been through like child abuse, complex PTSD, anything like that, and if your nightmares revolve around that, or if everyone else's nightmares are just kind of like random. Because mine seems to be so directly just like exactly what hurt me in the first place. Yeah. Fuck. No one ever helps. Yeah. Do the hard work, especially when you don't feel like it.